Chapter 992. Even if that was the case, Wei Ling should have ignored it and not initiated an attack without a second word. So the reason for the attack was because of a secret letter. There was no need to doubt that the person who wrote the letter must have been set up by Jingyu. Right now, the people from the four nations were all here to fight for the other pupil. If the other pupil were to side with any of the nations, then that nation would have to bear the merciless slaughter of the other three nations. That was why such a scene had occurred. It's too late to say anything now. Let's see how we deal with this pack of wolves. Wei Ling's words fell, and the two of them looked at the pack of wolves on the hill. They're here. Just as the two of them were talking, the pack of wolves on the hill had already charged down from all directions. The Cebu soldiers lined up and raised their shields to block the wolves. Although they could block the enemies, they had no way of blocking the claws of these ferocious beasts. Roar! The pack of wolves was like a pack of wolves that had been starved for a long time. They charged towards the Cebu soldiers in a frenzy. The soldiers raised their bows and started shooting. Some of the wolves fell after being hit by the arrows. Wei Ling and Mu Qinghua saw that this move was effective and quickly called for more people to raise their bows. Jingyu sat on the back of Yinjian and saw this scene clearly. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly as she looked to the side. Finally, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She raised her hand and whistled again. The clear whistling sound could be heard clearly. Ha ha ha! It's finally our turn. A joyful voice rang out. Within the forest, a pitch-black figure suddenly jumped out. The pitch-black Qilin beast was immediately exposed in front of everyone. That is, Wei Ling and Mu Qinghua both saw the black Qilin. Their eyes widened slightly, and there was some astonishment in their eyes. Black Qilin. Wei Ling's eyes narrowed as he accurately called out the name of the black Qilin. You recognize him? Mu Qinghua turned her head and looked at Wei Ling. There was a hint of scrutiny in her eyes. Ha ha! Wei Ling's eyes were cold as he said, in the Cebu historical records, it was recorded that the black Qilin was an ancient beast. It was said that the black Qilin was a king, but now, Wei Ling looked at the increasing number of ink Qilins on the hill, and his heart trembled. These ink Qilins looked very similar to the ink Qilins in the painting, but when he looked carefully, there was a difference. The ink Qilins in the book mentioned that the ink Qilin's fur wasn't pitch black. Instead, it was colored. When he looked at it carefully, the horns on the ink Qilin's head were different from the ones in the painting. This ink Qilin was definitely not the ink Qilin recorded in the book. Perhaps it was another kind of Qilin? Hiss! When Mu Qinghua saw the hundreds of black Qilins and the person riding on them, she sucked in a breath of cold air. These people were the ones who chased after me. Mu Qinghua gritted her teeth as she looked at these people and said, I knew it. With these people, they could bury us in the forest. However, they didn't do that. Instead, they chased us all the way here and forced us to come here. Then it makes sense. Wei Ling clenched his fists and looked up at the woman sitting on the gray wolf in the distance. He said, You are indeed Xiao Qin's woman. You have such a big appetite. You want to eat both the Cebu and Nanli? Chapter 993. Brothers Kill. While Wei Ling and Mu Qinghua were talking, more than 100 good men from the Ink Cavalry charged in the direction of the Shiwu garrison. Each of them had a ferocious look on their faces and looked unstoppable. Release the arrows. The commanding officer was almost scared to death by this scene. He raised his hand and waved it, shouting to release the arrows. But at this moment, something strange happened. Originally, it should have been easy to hit the wolf, but at this time, the soldier clearly aimed at the wolf and released the arrow in his hand. But just as the arrow was about to hit the wolf, the gray wolf nimbly dodged and avoided the arrow. This scene shocked the soldier. How did the wolf's dodging speed become so fast? The soldier thought that this was an accident. He raised his hand and released several arrows, but they were all dodged by the wolf. He immediately knew that something was wrong. This situation did not happen to just one person. Instead, it happened to all the soldiers who were shooting arrows. None of their arrows could hit the wolf. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the soldiers' tents. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. What's going on? Have these wolves become demons? The commanding officer was also shocked by this scene and shouted loudly, "No, the wolves have become demons." Wei Ling clearly saw this scene from the side. His heart trembled slightly. A pair of pitch-black eyes stared intently at the woman on the mound. Under Wei Ling's gaze, the pair of golden eyes slowly turned into a dark green color. This is the power of the strange pupils? Wei Ling stared at Jing Yu's eyes and murmured. There was a touch of passion in Jing Yu's eyes. At this moment, Wei Ling had never felt this way before. The feeling of wanting to obtain a person was extremely strong. Strange pupils. Mu Qinghua was also shocked by this scene. At this moment, her thoughts were exactly the same as Wei Ling's. There was no doubt that this scene was caused by Jing Yu. Strange pupils beast taming. So this was what it was like. If they could obtain the strange pupils, what else could they not obtain in the world? At this moment, the two people's eyes became incomparably hot. Under the attack of the Black Kirin, the so-called protection of the shield was no longer of any use. For the sake of protection, they immediately gave up on the protection and changed tactics. It had to be said that Wei Ling's ability was not a bluff. His ability to adapt made Jing Yu, who was standing on the hill, gasp in amazement. The Cebu soldiers were not ignorant. Under this rapid change, they immediately grasped the crux of the matter. When they saw the Black Kirin, they immediately surrounded these people and spread out. The Black Kirin, which was originally 5 teams, was completely divided up. One had to know that this time, there were many people from the Cebu. With so many soldiers, how difficult would it be to deal with a mere 200 Mahist cavalry? Many people from Nanli had died. Towards the end, Mu Qinghua could not hold on anymore and had already retreated to the second line to fend off a small portion of the wolf pack's attacks. Jing Yu, who was on the hill, watched this scene quietly. After the Mahist cavalry was scattered, their combat ability had obviously decreased significantly. Everyone was struggling to fight, but Jing Yu still stood on the hill and did not make any moves. "Madam." Xing Er slowly walked over from behind, followed by Shangwan Linglan. The two of them stood beside Jing Yu and watched this scene quietly. Chapter 994. Jing Yu responded softly when she saw Xing Er and Shangwan Linglan. Then, she continued to observe the situation in front of her. Li Weiming and the others don't seem to be in a good situation. Shangwan Linglan raised her head slightly. After looking for a while, she turned to Jing Yu and said, "HM." Jing Yu responded calmly and said, "Let them suffer a little and let them know where they are lacking." After Jing Yu finished speaking, Shangwan Linglan and Xing Er both looked at Jing Yu. If they want to grow, they have to experience something. Jing Yu didn't explain much and continued to observe the situation below. After the initial chaos, the Cebu had completely reacted. The soldiers' ability to react was clear. Jing Yu looked at Wei Ling. This man who was as famous as Xiao Chun was indeed extraordinary. The crown prince of the Cebu, Wei Ling. Xing Er narrowed his eyes at Wei Ling and said calmly, "Madam, Wei Ling is not easy to deal with." "I know." Jing Yu narrowed her eyes lazily and said calmly, "I don't want to deal with him either. With Xiao Chun around, why should I waste my time?" Xing Er was slightly stunned and looked at Jing Yu helplessly. Although that was what he said, it was inexplicably strange that Jing Yu said it so simply. "It looks like it's about time." Jing Yu looked at the situation in front of her and curled her lips slightly. After saying this, the chaotic battle in the field finally changed. The Black Qilin and the others who were originally surrounded were already struggling to hold on. At this moment, the attacking wolves all rushed towards the Black Qilin and helped Li Weiming and the others break out of the encirclement. Their mouths were full of blood, and their white teeth were particularly frightening. Rows of wolves all stood in one place and blocked the Cebu's pursuers. The Cebu soldiers also stopped what they were doing. They really didn't dare to charge forward. The ferocious appearance of these wolves was too frightening. They didn't dare to charge forward if they didn't have the ability. The two sides faced each other. Jing Yu narrowed her eyes at this scene. She watched as the wolves blocked the Cebu soldiers, and Li Weiming and the others rode the Black Qilin back to Jing Yu's side. Everyone who came back this time was wounded. They all lowered their heads and looked at Jing Yu, who was sitting on Silver Arrow, without saying a word. "Boss." Li Weiming panted slightly and called out, "Let's go." Jingyu looked at everyone indifferently. Her face was calm and expressionless. She turned and walked into the dense forest. Wei Ling saw Jingyu's movements and his eyes flashed. He stepped forward as if he wanted to chase after her. However, just as Wei Ling was about to do so, the wolves standing in a row suddenly let out a low growl. The warning in their growls made Wei Ling stop in his tracks. "Your Highness, what do we do now?" When the Western Martial Commander saw this scene, his pupils shrank slightly. He looked at the wolves in front of him with some fear. He quickly walked in front of Wei Ling and asked, "There's no need to chase after them." Wei Ling looked at the wolves blocking the path and said indifferently, "The 9th Imperial Concubine doesn't seem to want us to chase after them. There are too many unknown factors if we chase after them now." Chapter 995.
Yes.
The general replied and nodded slowly. "Thank you so much for this." Mu Qinghua looked sideways at Wei Ling and said, "After suffering such a huge loss, only the northern pastoral is still safe."
Ha ha ha.
Wei Ling's lips curled into a faint smile as he said, "That might not be the case." In the forest, Jingyu led Li Weiming and the rest into the forest again. Not long after Jingyu left, the wolves that blocked the way finally retreated slowly. Finally, under everyone's gaze, the wolves dispersed like how they came. Tranquility was restored on the open plain. At this moment, Jingyu, Li Weiming, and the others were recuperating in the forest. The Ink cavalry had fought very strenuously in this battle. Everyone seemed to have understood something. At this moment, they were all silently bandaging their wounds. Jingyu was quietly combing the fur of Yin Jian and Yin Feng. She did not speak. "Madam, Master sent a message." When everyone was silent, second interrogation officer walked over with a roll of paper in his hand. Jingyu raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard this. She raised her hand to receive the letter and lowered her head to read it. When she saw the contents of the letter, a faint smile appeared in her eyes. "I understand." Jingyu handed the letter back to Xing'er and slowly stood up and walked towards everyone. When everyone saw Jingyu walking over, they all stood up and looked at Jingyu. Jingyu smiled and said to everyone, "Do you have any other thoughts about this battle? Do you know why I only looked at you and did not participate?" Jingyu narrowed her eyes and asked everyone, "I don't know." Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads in confusion. "I'm going to leave and you guys are going to stay." When Jingyu said this, everyone's eyes widened and looked at Jingyu in shock. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Li Weiming and the other captains took a step forward and wanted to say something, but Jingyu raised her hand to stop them. "I know that you guys are no match for the Cebu, but I still brought you guys. Do you know why?" Jingyu looked up at everyone and asked, Is it to train us?" Li Weiming and the rest thought for a moment and asked with a frown. "That's right." Jingyu nodded seriously and said, "Only real battles will let you guys know how much you guys are lacking. Now, I want you guys to stay because I want you guys to use the Cebu as your whetstone. I want to return to Jinling, and you guys will become the kings of this forest, the kings of the jungle." Jingyu took a deep breath and said, "Yin Jian and Yin Feng will stay as well. I want you guys to become famous in the battle with the Western region. When the Cebu becomes your stepping stone, there may be brothers who leave us in the process. But don't be sad. What you need to do is to carry the glory of your brothers and continue to fight until you die." Jingyu's words were powerful and resonant. Everyone's eyes lit up and looked at Jingyu. At this moment, everyone's eyes were burning with passion and they all clenched their fists. Make up for themselves and become whetstones. Live on with the glory of their brothers. I look forward to hearing the name of the Mahist cavalry in Jinling town. Jingyu smiled faintly and said, "Without my command and leadership, what will you guys be like?" Chapter 996. These were the last words Jingyu left for them. Jingyu left with Shangguan Linglan and Xing'er. She left in such a hurry that she didn't even give them time to react. Boss is gone. In the forest, 187 men stood upright. Regardless of whether they were seriously injured or not, all of them were looking in the direction Jingyu had left in at the moment. What they felt was not abandonment, but rather the feeling of being free to grow. No one knew whether they would live or die, whether they would make a name for themselves or be buried here. Jingyu did not seem to care, and just let them go freely. Jingyu, Shangguan Linglan, and Xing Er walked on the road and looked at the scenery in front of them. Shangguan Linglan really didn't understand why Jingyu did this. She had put in so much effort to train this group of people, but she didn't hold back at all at this time. What? You don't know what I'm trying to do? Jingyu looked at Shangguan Linglan and seemed to know what Shangguan Linglan was thinking. She smiled and said, "What I'm doing is very simple. I can't always be with them. Only by letting them grow can they know what they will be like in the future." Jingyu smiled faintly. Her eyes were deep and silent as she looked into the distance. She said, "I hope they understand that no one can protect them forever. If they want to grow, they have to go through hardships. I'm doing this for their own good." Jingyu's expression didn't change much. She looked at Shangguan Linglan and said, "Do you think I'm too cruel?" "No." Shangguan Linglan shook his head and said, "Jingyu, if I were you, I wouldn't be able to do what you did. Ha ha ha. Let's go." Jingyu laughed loudly. Her lips curled into a faint smile as she turned around and walked out of the forest. They stayed in the forest for a month. After more than a month, it was finally time to part. Jingyu, Shangguan Linglan, and Xing Er walked for a long time, and finally walked out of the forest and onto the main road. After buying a horse from a horse merchant, Jingyu led Shangguan Linglan and Xing Er to Jinling Town. This Jinling Town was completely different from the Jinling Town that Jingyu saw the last time she left. Originally, the town didn't have so much sand and stones. But now, the walls were raised and there were huge rocks and other things on top of it. There were guards everywhere. Looking from afar, Jinling looked like an iron bucket. Everyone couldn't care less about it from afar. I didn't expect Jinling to become like this. Jingyu stood on the main road and sighed deeply as she looked at the small town in front of her that had now become like this. "Master is waiting for Madam in the town." Xing Er looked at Jingyu and said, "Okay, let's go." Jingyu smiled and nodded. She followed Xing Er into the town. The three of them were stopped outside the town. When the guard saw that it was Xing Er and Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan behind him, his eyes lit up in surprise. The 9th Imperial Concubine is back. When the soldier saw Jingyu, his eyes were filled with shock. His eyes trembled slightly as he quickly raised his hand to open a path for Jingyu, Shangguan Linglan, and the others to pass through. Chapter 997. Jingyu didn't know if she was hallucinating, but she clearly felt a strange feeling. When she saw the city gates open, she suddenly felt as though she was about to return home. This feeling made Jingyu nervous for a moment. Jinling. Jingyu looked at the two words written on the main gate. She narrowed her eyes and suddenly smiled. The soldiers looked curiously at Jingyu and Xing Er. Then, under everyone's gaze, Jingyu's pitch-black eyes suddenly flickered and a faint golden color appeared in the depths of her eyes. Under everyone's astonished gazes, the pair of pitch-black eyes easily turned golden. The pair of golden eyes were so dazzling that everyone held their breaths at this moment. "Let's go." Jingyu's lips curled into a faint smile. The light in her eyes was so dazzling and eye-catching. She waved the horsewhip in her hand and sped forward. That pitch-black figure caused everyone's eyes to narrow slightly. That's the power of otherworldly pupils. Their otherworldly pupils, Imperial Concubine. The soldiers had yet to recover from the shock of Jingyu's otherworldly pupils. When they saw Jingyu's figure disappear before their eyes, they murmured in fear. The news of Jingyu's return seemed to have spread through the entire Jinling in an instant. It caused quite a stir in the peaceful Jinling town. Many soldiers walked on the streets and immediately saw Jingyu on horseback. That pair of golden eyes caused everyone to be extremely shocked. It's the 9th Imperial Concubine. The 9th Imperial Concubine is back. Who in Jinling didn't know Jingyu? Back then, that portrait was plastered all over the city. Now, Jingyu didn't hide it at all and openly revealed her otherworldly pupils. Everyone saw Jingyu's pair of otherworldly pupils. Jingyu rode on her horse and slowed it down slightly. Her lips curled into a faint smile as she looked around at the crowd. Second Xing and Shangguan Linglan followed behind Jingyu. For some reason, at this moment, everyone suddenly had an illusion. It was as though Jingyu was the king of this kingdom, and it was time for the king to return to the city. Shangguan Linglan and Xing Er, who were following behind Jingyu, had the strongest feeling. Jingyu didn't say a word or do anything, but at this moment, they had such a clear feeling. It was very shocking. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion in the crowd. Jingyu looked up slightly and saw that the crowd was slowly opening up a path. A black figure stood in the middle and looked at Jingyu with a pair of cold eyes. Xiaochun. Jingyu revealed a faint smile and dismounted from her horse. The two of them looked at each other from a distance. Everyone retreated to the side. Xiaochun walked steadily towards Jingyu and stood in front of Jingyu. "You're back?" Xiaochun looked at Jingyu from head to toe and asked. "Yes, I'm back." Jingyu looked up at Xiaochun and replied. "It's good that you're back." Xiaochun held Jingyu's hand and led her away. Everyone watched as Jingyu and Xiaochun left. They were both dressed in black and had attractive faces. Chapter 998. The two of them walked very slowly with their hands clasped together, receiving everyone's attention. Jingyu didn't know why, but at this moment, she felt as though she had stepped into a marriage hall. Jingyu shook her body violently and continued walking forward. Under everyone's gaze, she stepped into the mansion. Jingyu and Xiaochun had just entered the mansion when they saw a figure rushing out. "Big brother?" Jingyu saw him at a glance. Who else could it be other than Jinglang? You're really back." When Jinglang saw Jingyu, his eyes revealed a surprised smile. He quickly walked towards Jingyu, his eyes full of surprise. "Big brother, I'm back." Jingyu threw herself into Jinglang's arms. Jinglang raised his hands and hugged Jingyu tightly. She didn't know why, but the moment she was hugged by Jinglang, Jingyu's feeling of returning home became even more profound. "Big brother, I missed you so much." Jingyu buried her head in Jinglang's arms. Suddenly, her eyes felt a little hot. Jinglang hugged Jingyu tightly, his eyes full of joy. He seemed to heave a sigh of relief and said slowly, "It's good that you're back. You worried me to death." "Big brother." The two of them hugged for a long time and spoke quietly for a while. Only then did Jingyu and Jinglang separate. Everyone sat in the house. Others who heard the news rushed over. Jingyu looked at the familiar faces and smiled faintly. Yuan Mingyuan and Jiaming, who had fled with Jingyu, were all here. Looking at these people's faces, Jingyu felt incomparably close. Everyone gathered together and talked for a long time before the topic was brought up to today's situation. "What's the situation now?" Jingyu tilted her head slightly to look at everyone and asked. "Lukewarm." Yuan Mingyuan said indifferently, "There's no movement between the four countries. Even if there is, it's just a small fight." "If the four nations haven't made a move, what about the Holy Family and the Poison Sect?" Jingyu asked with a frown. Everyone was stunned for a moment before replying. "These people don't seem to have come to Jinling at all. We haven't seen them at all." "No news?" Jingyu was slightly taken aback. She looked at everyone in surprise before finally turning her gaze to Xiaochun. "Yes." After receiving Jingyu's gaze, Xiaochun nodded and said, "That's true. The Holy Family and Poison Sect's people seem to have suddenly disappeared. They didn't show up here at all. What's going on?" Jingyu frowned when she heard this. She fell into deep thought. "I'm also investigating the cause." Xiaochun replied faintly, "It's because of these uncertain factors that I had you come back first." Jingyu frowned and said, "The Holy Family and Poison Sect can't be underestimated. If there's any news, we have to treat it seriously." Everyone chatted for a while before dispersing. Jingyu had been running around all day and was already tired. She took a comfortable bath and went to sleep. As the person in charge, Xiaochun naturally couldn't accompany Jingyu and run around Jinling Town. By the time Jingyu woke up, the sky was already dark. Jingyu was completely awakened by hunger. Chapter 999. I'm so hungry. Is there anything to eat? Jingyu walked around and finally found the kitchen. The moment she entered the kitchen, she saw a bowl of noodles on the stove. Immediately, Jing Yu's eyes lit up. That's mine. However, before Jing Yu could reach out her hand, a voice came from behind her. Jing Yu froze. She thought that since she said it was someone else's, she wouldn't touch it. However, Jing Yu quickly rushed over and picked up the bowl. Then, she turned to look at the person standing at the kitchen door and spat into the big bowl of noodles. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jing Yu's actions and saw Jing Yu spit into the noodles. His face instantly changed. He was probably disgusted by Jing Yu. Yours? Then I'll give it back to you. Jing Yu handed the bowl of noodles in front of her without changing her expression and looked at Yuan Mingyuan with a smile. Instantly, Yuan Mingyuan's face became very strange. The corner of his mouth twitched as he said, "Eat it yourself." After saying that, Yuan Mingyuan walked to the stove and prepared to continue cooking the noodles. Jing Yu looked at Yuan Mingyuan's actions and smiled. However, she lowered her head and looked at the bowl of noodles in her hand. Jing Yu suddenly felt that she couldn't eat it. Then, why don't you eat it? Jing Yu coughed and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. Yuan Mingyuan stared at Jing Yu for a long time. He raised his hand and took the bowl of noodles from Jing Yu's hand and poured it into the bucket. He looked at Jing Yu with a strange expression and said, "So you can feel disgusted too? I thought you would eat the spit back." Pfft, so disgusting. Hearing Yuan Mingyuan's words, Jing Yu instantly thought of that scene and felt nauseous. She quickly waved her hand and said, "Stop talking. I've lost my appetite." "There's nothing for you to eat anyway," Yuan Mingyuan said to Jing Yu with a smile. "What?" Jing Yu jumped up when she heard this. She glared at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "Isn't there face? Why is there nothing for me to eat?" "Cook it yourself," Yuan Mingyuan replied calmly. Jing Yu's face immediately turned green. She pointed at Yuan Mingyuan angrily and said, "You're cooking anyway. Will you lose a piece of meat if you cook more?" "Beg me." Yuan Mingyuan pulled out a kitchen knife and cut the carrot into pieces. Jing Yu was dumbstruck by his knife skills. "Wow, Yuan Mingyuan, you're from New Oriental, right?" Jing Yu looked at Yuan Mingyuan in shock. "What?" Yuan Mingyuan paused and looked at Jing Yu in confusion. Jing Yu quickly waved her hand to indicate that she was fine. Smelling Yuan Mingyuan's cooking, the aroma made Jing Yu's stomach growl. "I'm so hungry." Jing Yu sat on a chair and stared unblinkingly at Yuan Mingyuan's skillful cooking. She frowned and said, "Why do you know how to cook? And why haven't you eaten?" "Who told you I haven't eaten?" Yuan Mingyuan replied calmly. You've eaten?" Jing Yu straightened up and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. She blinked and said, "You've eaten. Why are you still cooking?" Chapter 1000. I was ordered to come. Yuan Mingyuan responded and scooped up the cooked noodles. He filled a bowl and placed it in front of Jing Yu and said, "I was ordered by the 9 emperors to cook noodles for you." "What?" Jing Yu looked at the bowl of noodles in front of her and was instantly confused. "So, that bowl of noodles was actually for me?" Jing Yu was instantly confused and stared at Yuan Mingyuan with wide eyes as she asked. "Yes." Yuan Mingyuan responded calmly. Jing Yu looked at the pot and saw that there really wasn't a second bowl of noodles. She then looked at the bowl of noodles that had been poured away. Finally, Jing Yu's gaze fell on Yuan Mingyuan and said, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" "Didn't I say so?" Yuan Mingyuan stood in front of Jing Yu and said, "That's mine. I cooked it." Jing Yu heard Yuan Mingyuan's explanation, and her face instantly darkened. She wanted to strangle this man to death. "Can't you just say something properly?" One word, despicable. After Jing Yu cursed Yuan Mingyuan in her heart, she raised her hand and picked up the chopsticks on the table. Just as she was about to eat, she suddenly turned to look at Yuan Mingyuan and said strangely, "That's not right. You're the head of Ghost King Cave. How could you be reduced to cooking noodles? You didn't put poison in the noodles, did you?" Jing Yu looked at Yuan Mingyuan in shock and said, "Why don't you eat until you die?" Yuan Mingyuan fiercely flung his sleeves and left. Jing Yu quickly picked up the noodles on the table and took a few bites before saying, Hey, I was just kidding. Wow, your cooking is really good. It's a pity that you're not a chef." Yuan Mingyuan decisively chose not to talk to Jingyu and walked out of the small courtyard with a faint smile in his eyes. Jingyu carried the bowl of noodles and followed Yuan Mingyuan out of the courtyard. Then, they sat down at the stone table in the courtyard. You really came to cook noodles for me? Jingyu asked Yuan Mingyuan as she ate the noodles. Yes. Yuan Mingyuan faintly replied and said, the Ninth Emperors went to deal with the Tokyo attack. Before he left, he ordered Yi Shui to cook noodles for you. However, not long after the Ninth Emperors left, Yi Shui suddenly received a message. Not long after the Ninth Emperor left. Yi Shui? Jingyu was slightly surprised and quickly swallowed the noodles in her mouth. She looked at Yuan Mingyuan with a surprised expression and said, there's news of White Nine? Where is he? Tokyo, Huangcheng. Yuan Mingyuan sighed deeply and said, Yi Shui has spent too much time looking for White Nine. Now that there's news of White Nine, Yi Shui naturally couldn't wait any longer. Before she could tell the Ninth Emperors, she left. So it's like that. Jingyu nodded slightly and understood Yi Shui's feelings. Jingyu finished the bowl of noodles and wiped her mouth comfortably. She looked at Yuan Mingyuan and said, thank you. The noodles were delicious. No need. Yuan Mingyuan calmly stood up and said, I only know how to cook noodles. It's better than me not knowing anything. Jingyu giggled and replied. Yuan Mingyuan's lips also curved into a faint smile. Jingyu was full, so she naturally went back to sleep. She said a few words to Yuan Mingyuan and then turned to leave. When Jingyu woke up for the second time, the sky was already bright. Jingyu opened her eyes slightly and felt a pair of hands around her waist. Jingyu turned her head slightly and saw Xiao Chun still sleeping with his eyes closed. Chapter 1001. Jingyu was slightly taken aback. She turned to look at Xiao Chun and stared at him. Only then did she realize that there was stubble on Xiao Chun's chin. Jingyu turned around and touched Xiao Chun's chin. Feeling the stubble, Jingyu's eyes trembled slightly. She ran her finger across Xiao Chun's lips. She didn't know when this man came back last night. Looking at the fatigue between his eyebrows, it seemed that he was exhausted. Last night, Yuan Mingyuan said that the Tokyo had started a new round of attack. Jingyu frowned slightly and fell into deep thought. Just as Jingyu was thinking, Xiao Chun quietly opened his eyes. A pair of dark eyes quietly looked at Jingyu. Jingyu looked up and was shocked to see Xiao Chun open his eyes. You're awake? Jingyu smiled and looked at Xiao Chun with a smile.
And
Xiao Chun responded. His voice was thick and nasal. He raised his arms and hugged Jingyu. He buried his head in Jingyu's neck and closed his eyes again. His voice was thick and hoarse as he said, let me sleep for a while. Go to sleep. Jingyu raised her hand to support Xiao Chun's head. She closed her eyes and felt Xiao Chun's fatigue. She suddenly felt her heart ache. When Xiao Chun woke up, it was already late in the morning. Jingyu wasn't sleepy at first, but she didn't know if she was infected by Xiao Chun or something. But she fell asleep as well. When she opened her eyes again, the two of them were in a daze. Do you have a headache? Xiao Chun propped himself up and raised his hand to touch Jingyu's cheek. Oh. Jingyu stretched lazily and said, I'm hungry from sleeping. When Xiao Chun heard Jingyu's words, his lips curled into a faint smile as he said, get up. There are probably many people waiting outside. Huh. Jingyu was slightly stunned. She didn't know what Xiao Chun meant. However, when Jingyu and Xiao Chun finished washing up and went out, they saw a group of people gathered at the door. Jingyu was instantly dumbfounded. Ninth brother, ninth sister-in-law. Qinggu stood in front of Jingyu and Xiao Chun. He looked at them helplessly and said, although we know that you haven't seen each other for a long time and miss each other, can you not do this right before the war? We need to control ourselves, don't you think so? Qinggu smiled as he looked at Xiao Chun and Jingyu. Lu Miaoqiu and Shangguan Linglan blushed at Qing Ji's words. Jingyu glared fiercely at Qinggu and said, it hasn't been long since we last met. Why do I feel that Qinggu should sew up your mouth? Cough, cough, cough. Qinggu immediately coughed when he heard this. He quickly moved aside and said, ninth brother, ninth sister-in-law, please. Jingyu's face darkened when she saw Qing Ji's sudden change. Jingyu didn't know if she was hallucinating, but she felt that Qinggu was becoming more and more despicable. That piece of white jade was now stained black by the secular world. When they followed Xiao Qian and the others to the main hall, they realized that something big had happened last night. No one knew what was wrong with Dongqing's troops. They actually launched such a huge attack. Xiao Qian dealt with it overnight, but there were still many casualties. Neither side gained any advantage. It was also in this battle that all the battles seemed to have started at this moment. Chapter 1002. In the forest, Sibu's camp was also filled with the sounds of battle. They had been attacked countless times, but they were unable to capture the enemy. The fires of war were lit everywhere. After the Tokyo S attack, Nanli began to stir again. The only place that had not made a move was the northern pastoral camp. But now, such a scene was happening in the northern pastoral camp. Mu Yu, are you going to send the troops or not? When the guards outside the camp heard the roars, they all raised their hands and dug their ears. They had heard this roar countless times. No. Another voice answered in a loud and clear voice. I'll fucking kill you. When he was with Mu Yu, Helian Xiao was at his most boorish. He had come all the way here just to snatch the other pupil. Now that he was already at the other party's doorstep, this guy actually refused to send his troops no matter what. Ah! Mu Yu jumped up and down in the camp. Helian Theo could not catch a glimpse of Mu Yu. It was infuriating. Jingyu is so pretty, so beautiful. You uncultured men, what if you accidentally hurt her? You can't send the troops. Mu Yu stood on the table and said while panting, You. Helian Theo's face darkened. He said fiercely, Do you think everyone is like you, charging at the front of every battle? I don't care. You can't send the troops. Mu Yu sat on the table with a listen to me expression. He looked like he wanted to see what Helian Theo was going to do about it. Mu Yu, are you going to send the troops or not? Helian Theo's lungs were about to explode. Mu Yu shook his head decisively. Then, the soldiers outside the camp could hear a lot of noise coming from the camp. The two guards looked at each other silently and sighed deeply. In Jinling Town, Jingyu and Xiao Chun sat together to discuss the war. Tokyo and Nanli were now fully mobilized. They could not sit still and wait for death. They had to think of a way to deal with it. Just as everyone was thinking of a plan, a person slowly came to the entrance of Jinling Town. This person wore a black robe and sat on a horse. His black hair was casually draped over his shoulders with a small portion pulled up. His resolute and handsome face was revealed amidst the wind and dust. He simply rode a horse and stood at the entrance of Jinling Town. This is Jinling City. That person raised his head slightly and looked at the town of Jinling. Almost all the trees outside this area had been cut down and turned into a wasteland. A gust of wind blew past and revealed his face. This familiar face was none other than Qinbai. His pitch-black eyes slightly curved as he looked in the direction of Jinling. Then, he raised his hand and urged his horse to continue forward. In the distance, the soldier guarding the gate saw Qinbai's figure. Stop! Who is it? The soldier pointed his spear at Qinbai and shouted coldly. Jingyu and Xiao Chun had just finished their discussion and were about to leave when they saw a soldier quickly run into the room. He bowed to Jingyu and Xiao Chun and said, Report. A man has appeared outside the town. He claims to be the fiancé of the 9th Imperial concubine. The expression on the soldier's face was rather strange. His words made everyone present feel strange. Many pairs of eyes looked towards Jingyu. Chapter 1003. Oh my God! Jingyu was stunned for a moment before she realized what was going on. She raised her hand and slapped her forehead. This Qinbai was really haunting her. Under everyone's strange gazes, Qinbai, who claimed to be the 9th Imperial concubine's fiancé, finally appeared in front of everyone. Everyone's eyes were like searchlights as they looked at Qinbai and Jingyu. Then, they looked at Xiao Chen. Unsurprisingly, Xiao Chen's face had already turned cold. Jingyu, I finally found you. Qinbai, who was dressed in black, stood in the middle of the main hall. His eyes were full of smiles as he looked at Jingyu. The moment Qinbai said this, Everyone's expression became even more strange. Could it be that Jingyu had a romantic debt outside? Even her fiancé had come out and chased after her all the way here. Everyone's eyes fell on Jingyu, waiting for her reaction. Did you take the wrong medicine? Jingyu looked at Qinbai with a conflicted expression and said, Didn't I tell you? I'm not your fiancé. Can't you see? This is my husband. I know. Qinbai nodded calmly and replied, I won't say it again. Qinbai's words sounded like he had been wronged. It made the people around him look at Jingyu even more strangely. They all stared at Jingyu. Jingyu could have opened her mouth 8 times, but she could not have explained herself. This is? Qinggu looked at Jingyu in confusion and asked, I am her fiancé. When Qinbai heard Qingji's question, he smiled and answered, I am her fiancé? Fuck. Was everything you said just now a fart? Jingyu was furious. Everyone looked at Jingyu and Qinbai strangely. Seeing Jingyu's reaction, everyone's expression became even stranger. What are you trying to do? When Jingyu wanted to say something, Xiao Qin raised his hand and held Jingyu's hand. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Qinbai. Nothing. Qinbai turned to look at Xiao Qin and said, I just want to be with Jingyu. Don't worry, I won't ruin your relationship. Qinbai calmly replied Xiao Qin. Everyone's eyes immediately. What did they just hear? Was someone declaring war on the 9 emperors? Xiao Qin's face suddenly darkened. He looked at Qinbai with a pair of cold eyes. Jingyu deeply felt that if looks could kill, Qinbai would definitely be dead. However, Qinbai didn't move at all under Xiao Qin's gaze. Even his expression didn't change. Qinbai, what are you doing here? Jingyu really didn't want to go anymore. She stared at Qinbai and said, I'm here to protect you. Qinbai looked at Jingyu seriously and said, The battle is so chaotic. I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to get hurt. Jingyu, I don't want you to get hurt. These words were so familiar that Jingyu was stunned for a moment. In that distant place, he said the same thing to her. These words made Jingyu's heart suddenly tremble uncontrollably. Who are you? Jingyu took a deep breath and looked at Qinbai as she asked. Qinbai paused for a moment and said, I'm a member of the Holy Family. What? After Qinbai finished speaking, everyone suddenly stood up and stared at Qinbai with vigilance. Qinbai didn't react at all. He just stood there and waited for Jingyu's reaction. Chapter 1004. You are from the Holy Family? Jingyu stared coldly at Qinbai. Yes, I am from the Holy Family. Qinbai looked at Jingyu and nodded slowly. You want to kill me? Give me a reason not to kill you. Jingyu's eyes were cold. She looked at Qinbai angrily. Qinbai's lips curled into a cold smile. He said, Jingyu, I have loved you for my entire life. As soon as Qinbai finished speaking, Jingyu's heart suddenly trembled violently. Forever? What forever? I will repay the debt I owed you in my previous life in this life. Qinbai's voice rang out again. This time, Jingyu wasn't the only one who couldn't remain calm. Even Xiao Qin couldn't remain calm. Everyone looked at the 3 of them in confusion. They had no idea what the 3 of them were talking about. They were all confused. Why were they talking about their previous lives again? Others didn't know, but Jingyu knew. The debt from their previous lives, they would repay it in this life. Number 9. Jingyu's eyes suddenly widened. She looked at Qinbai, and her body trembled slightly. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to ask something, but no words came out. She just stared straight at Qinbai. Jingyu, I just want to protect you. Qinbai lowered his eyes slightly. When he looked up, his dark eyes quietly looked at Jingyu. There was nothing else in his eyes. He said faintly, I forgot everything, but I only remember you. Number 9. At this moment, Jingyu's heart suddenly trembled uncontrollably. It was only a few sentences, but they contained a lot of information. Jingyu stared at Qinbai, and Qinbai stared at Jingyu. Xiao Qin stood next to Jingyu. At that moment, the feeling of his heart shaking was very clear. Xiao Qin didn't know if it was an illusion, but for a moment, he actually thought that Jingyu would leave him. When he thought of this, Xiao Qin's heart suddenly ached. He raised his hand to grab Jingyu's hand and pulled her stiffly behind him, blocking Qin Bai's gaze. Since you are a member of the Holy Family, why are you here? Xiao Qin's dark, cold eyes stared at Qin Bai as he asked. I told you, I'm here to look for Jing Yu. Qin Bai raised his head slightly and looked at Xiao Chun as he spoke. Xiao Chun. Jing Yu raised her hand to grab Xiao Qin's hand. Her eyes were filled with excitement as she stared at Xiao Chun and said, Let him stay. I have some questions for him. When Xiao Chun heard her words, he tightened his grip on Jing Yu's hand. Although he was extremely unwilling, Xiao Chun still agreed under Jing Yu's gaze. Just like this, when everyone was completely confused and didn't understand what was going on, Qin Bai, who suddenly appeared and claimed to be Jing Yu's fiancé, actually stayed. Qin Bai's arrival was like a small stone being thrown into a calm lake, causing ripples to appear on the calm surface of the lake. Qin Bai's arrival was so coincidental and timely that Xiao Qin's uneasiness grew even stronger. It was a kind of uneasiness that made Xiao Qin a little irritable. Originally, he thought that Qin Bai was a member of the Holy Family. Xiao Qin already had his guesses. However, he didn't expect that Qin Bai would take the initiative to talk about this matter. Chapter 1005. Saying it out loud was different from saying it out loud. Xiao Chun did not understand why Qin Bai would suddenly reveal who he was. He did not hesitate to reveal who he was. What was Qin Bai's purpose for doing this? Jing Yu's thoughts were different from Xiao Qin's. She just wanted to ask Qin Bai what he meant by his words today. Jing Yu naturally went to ask him. Qin Bai was sitting in a room in his black robe. Jing Yu sat across from Qin Bai and looked at Qin Bai calmly. I don't know either. After the two of them looked at each other for a long time, Qin Bai finally sighed and said, I don't know you, but I feel like I do. I don't remember anything except you, Jing Yu. You. Jing Yu heard Qin Bai's words, and her heart started beating uncontrollably. She looked up at Qin Bai and saw Qin Bai's familiar face. Jing Yu suddenly felt her heart tremble violently. That familiar feeling made her feel that the person in front of her was the one she was looking for. However, there was a voice in her heart telling her that this person wasn't the one she was looking for. This strange feeling made Jing Yu cover her chest in discomfort. In the end, she didn't say anything and turned to leave. The moonlight enveloped Jinling town, and the pure white moonlight shone on the courtyard. Jing Yu was wearing a black cloak and a thin undergarment. She stood there and looked at the sky quietly. No one knew what she was thinking. Jing Yu stood in the courtyard in a daze until she heard footsteps behind her. A pair of arms wrapped around Jing Yu's waist. Jing Yu trembled slightly and turned to look. A familiar scent surrounded the tip of her nose. Xiao Chun silently hugged Jing Yu's waist and didn't say a word. Xiao Chun, I think he's the one I'm looking for. Jing Yu seemed very distressed. She looked at Xiao Chun and said, What should I do? Xiao Chun hugged Jing Yu tightly and said, If he's the one you're looking for, how do you plan to treat him? Jing Yu looked up at Xiao Chun and frowned slightly. I just want to repay him, then let him stay. After Xiao Chun heard Jing Yu's words, he said calmly, The person you want to repay is the person I want to repay? Xiao Chun, you're willing? Jing Yu heard Xiao Chun's words and her eyes lit up. She was pleasantly surprised. I believe you. Xiao Chun raised his hand to touch Jing Yu's cheek and said, I believe you. I believe you will never betray me. Xiao Chun's voice was very firm as he stared at Jing Yu with his dark eyes. Xiao Chun. Jing Yu looked up at Xiao Chun and suddenly felt very touched. She buried her head in Xiao Chun's arms and sighed deeply. Qin Bai stayed in Jinling town. Nothing happened. Qin Bai just walked around Jinling town, or rather, he liked to walk behind Jing Yu. He didn't say or do anything strange. Dong Qing and Nan Li's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer. Xiao Chun and Jing Yu were so busy that their feet barely touched the ground. Finally, after half a month, the originally urgent war suddenly stopped, and it stopped in such a strange way. Chapter 1006. Just as everyone was wondering what was going on, something big happened in Jinling town. It was a big deal, a really big deal. What did you say? Xiao Chun was discussing something with everyone in the room when a soldier suddenly rushed in. The 9th Imperial concubine fell off her horse when she was patrolling. She's being treated in the room right now. The soldier was also sweating profusely. His face was full of panic as he spoke again. Before the soldier finished speaking, Xiao Chun rushed out. Shangguan Linglan, Lu Miaoqiu, Qin Bai, Yuan Mingyuan, and the others all rushed out of the room. What's going on? The 9th Imperial concubine's situation is very bad right now. The military doctor who was taking her pulse said, "The fetus is very unstable right now. I'm afraid there will be signs of a miscarriage if she's not careful." Wait, what did you just say? Shangguan Linglan and Lu Miaoqiu were women, so they entered the room first. They were filled with worry, but after hearing the imperial doctor's words, they were instantly dumbfounded. They looked at the military doctor in a daze and asked, "What? Don't you know that the 9th Imperial concubine is pregnant?" The military doctor looked at the two's expressions and was slightly taken aback. He asked with a puzzled expression. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. Xiao Chun, who had just received the news and rushed over, couldn't even hold the sword in his hand. The sword in his hand fell to the ground as he stood at the door. His face was full of shock. The 9th Emperors. Everyone turned around when they heard the sound. When they saw that it was the 9th Emperors, their expressions instantly changed. They turned their heads and let Xiao Chun walk over. Jingyu was lying on the bed with her face slightly pale and her eyes tightly shut. Xiao Chun stared at Jingyu. At this moment, his mind was blank and he didn't know how to react. He just walked over to Jingyu in a daze. She's pregnant. After being stunned for a moment, Xiao Chun seemed to find his voice again as he stared blankly at the military doctor and asked, "Yes, according to the 9th Imperial concubine's pulse, the 9th Imperial concubine's fetus is already full term." The military doctor hurriedly replied when he heard Xiao Chun's question. Full term? Xiao Chun's heart trembled violently. He suddenly thought of the time when he forced himself on Jingyu and Baylor. That time. Xiao Chun's eyes suddenly widened as he thought about it. A strong sense of surprise flashed across his eyes. In other words, I'm going to be a father? Xiao Chun looked at the military doctor in a daze as he asked, "Congratulations to the 9th Emperors. Congratulations to the 9th Emperors." The military doctor hurriedly said as he knelt down. Xiao Chun was stunned for a full 3 seconds. A strong sense of suffocating joy overwhelmed his heart and made Xiao Chun speechless at this moment. His originally expressionless face also revealed a smile. Shangguan Linglan and Lu Miaoqiu finally reacted. Jingyu was actually pregnant. Qin Bai and Yuan Mingyuan, who were outside, finally heard the commotion in the room. Their eyes flashed with strong shock. Jingyu was actually pregnant at such a critical moment? Yuan Mingyuan's shock only appeared for a moment before the shock in his eyes turned into joy. He didn't expect Jingyu to be pregnant. However, the 9th Emperors and Jingyu had been married for a long time, so it was natural for her to be pregnant. However, when he thought of the current situation, Yuan Mingyuan's expression became serious again. Given the current situation, would Jingyu be able to keep the child in her stomach? It was said that different pupils were hereditary. What would happen if the child was born with different pupils? Chapter 1007. When Yuan Mingyuan thought of this, his expression turned serious. Meanwhile, Qin Bai, who was standing beside Yuan Mingyuan, had a strange expression on his face. When Qin Bai heard the news of Jingyu's pregnancy, he was shocked for a moment. Then, his shock turned serious, and his dark eyes looked as if he had encountered a problem that he didn't understand. After a moment, his eyes slowly darkened and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. It was extremely frightening. 9th Emperors, the baby in the 9th Imperial concubine's womb hasn't stabilized yet. It is very likely that she will have a miscarriage. Within these 2 months, you must not let the 9th Imperial concubine do anything overboard. The military doctor's voice slowly rang out in the room. What? Xiao Chun was still immersed in joy when he suddenly heard the military doctor's words. He was slightly taken aback, and then a look of anxiety appeared in his eyes. He said, "What's wrong with Jingyu? What miscarriage? Explain it clearly to this king." Ninth Emperors, don't be anxious. The military doctor spoke again. The ninth imperial concubine was just pregnant and didn't notice it. This caused her to overexert herself and affect the fetus. She just needs to rest for a while. I will prescribe some medicine to stabilize the fetus. All right, no matter what, you must ensure the safety of both mother and child. Xiao Chen's expression turned serious. He looked at Jingyu, who was lying on the bed, and his gaze fell on Jingyu's womb. His eyes darkened slightly, as if he had made a very important decision. I understand. The military doctor responded and hurriedly went to prescribe the medicine. Xiao Chun walked over to Jingyu's bedside and raised his hand to touch Jingyu's face. His eyes were filled with pity. He never expected that an accident would cause Jingyu to become pregnant. This time, everything was outside of his plan. Xiao Chun was very excited and happy, but he was also very worried. Jingyu had said that she didn't want to have a child for the time being. Now that she was unexpectedly pregnant, would Jingyu keep the child when she woke up and found out about this news? Xiao Chen's heart trembled when he thought of this. No matter what, he had to make Jingyu keep the child. This was their child. When Jingyu woke up, it was already evening. Jingyu raised her head slightly to look at the curtains above her head. She was stunned for a moment. Her memory stopped at patrolling the martial arts arena. She was still patrolling. Jingyu suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in her stomach. Then, she felt dizzy and fell from the horse's back. If Jingyu hadn't been quick enough to catch her, she would have been in big trouble. Jingyu blinked her eyes and looked at the place where she was lying. Just as she was about to sit up, she saw Xiao Chen walk in with a bowl of medicine. The moment Xiao Chun stepped into the room, Jingyu propped herself up and tried to sit up. Her eyes were filled with surprise. He hurriedly put down the bowl in his hand and strode over. He quickly supported Jingyu and said, "Don't move. Lie down properly." "Xiao Chun?" Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun with a puzzled expression and asked, "What's wrong with me? What are you doing?" "I'm not sick." "You're pregnant." Xiao Chun helped Jingyu lie down. Then, he stared at Jingyu and said word by word. When Jingyu heard Xiao Chen's words, she was stunned for a long time. Then, she laughed and said, "Don't joke around. How is that possible?" Chapter 1008. Have you forgotten that time with Baylor? Xiao Chen looked at Jingyu's smile, but there was no trace of a smile on his face. Then, the smile on Jingyu's face froze, as if she had thought of something. She looked at the medicine Xiao Chun had placed on the table with a strange expression. "This is pregnancy-stabilizing medicine," Xiao Chun said calmly as he raised his hand and placed the medicine in front of Jingyu. "Wait." Jingyu stared at the pregnancy-stabilizing medicine Xiao Chun had brought over. Her face was full of horror. She swallowed her saliva and looked at Xiao Chen with uncertainty. "What did you just say?" I'm really pregnant?" "This stomach? There's a villain inside?" Jingyu's eyes widened as she stared at Xiao Chun. "Yes, it's our child." Xiao Chen replied happily. He looked at Jingyu's stomach as if he could see through it. "Holy shit." Jingyu cursed uncivilly. She looked at her flat stomach and couldn't wrap her head around it. How could there be a baby in her stomach? Jingyu looked up at the curtains for a full minute before she accepted this inhumane reality. She hesitated as she drank the pregnancy-stabilizing medicine. This was the first time Jingyu was so conflicted as she thought about life on the bed. How could she be pregnant with a fucking baby? "Jingyu." Xiao Chen suddenly grabbed Jingyu's hand and stared at Jingyu seriously. "This is this king's child. You can't abandon him." Jingyu looked at Xiao Chen's nervous expression and frowned slightly. "When did I say I didn't want him? Didn't you say you didn't want children?" Xiao Chen looked at Jingyu with a slight frown. Sigh. Jingyu sighed heavily when she heard Xiao Chen's words. "I wasn't pregnant at the time. Of course, I didn't want children. But now that I'm pregnant, how can I not want them?" "Really?" Xiao Chen's eyes lit up when he heard Jingyu's words. His nervous heart finally calmed down when he heard Jingyu's words. "I thought you wouldn't want this child." Xiao Chen heaved a sigh of relief as he looked at Jingyu. "What are you talking about?" Jingyu glared at Xiao Chen. She sat up straight and said, "But now that I'm pregnant with this child, we have to plan for the future. If this child inherits my abnormal pupils, I will lose my abnormal pupils. I haven't taken my revenge yet." Jingyu raised her hand and placed it on her stomach. Her eyes were filled with struggle. "You err." Xiaochen placed his hand on top of Jingyu's hand and said, "I will take revenge for you. Trust me." Xiaochen's expression was so resolute. Jingyu raised her head and looked at Xiaochen. Her heart trembled slightly and her eyes lit up. She looked at Xiaochen and said, "I don't want Daddy to wait for too long." "I understand." Xiaochen sighed deeply and said, "From the very beginning, I never thought of relying on your eyes. Even without them, I will definitely be able to avenge your father's death." Jingyu's pregnancy was announced in such a grand fashion. This pregnancy came so suddenly that the next morning, Jingyu grabbed Xiaochen and asked in a heavy voice, "Is she really, really pregnant?" Chapter 1009. "Yes, that's right. You're pregnant." Shangguan Linglan patted Jingyu on the shoulder and said deeply, "You should accept this fact." Jingyu sat on the bed and stared at Shangguan Linglan with a conflicted expression. She sighed deeply and still couldn't accept this fact. She said that she couldn't have children for the time being. How did she get pregnant? Things were getting troublesome now. Where's Xiaochen? Xiaochen left early in the morning and Jingyu was lying on the bed, bored. It was said that Jingyu wasn't allowed to get out of bed and walk around. She was ordered to lie on the bed and couldn't go anywhere. He went to the military camp. Shangguan Linglan, on the other hand, knew that Jingyu must be bored in this room. She held a book in her hand and leisurely read it. Yeah, you've made the 9th emperors very busy." Lu Miaoqiu was extremely excited when she found out that Jingyu was pregnant. She even started sewing clothes for the baby early in the morning. Even if the 9th emperors is busy, he's still happy. Shangguan Linglan put down the book in his hand and said in horror, "Didn't you see the expression on the 9th emperor's face when he left this morning? I actually saw the 9th emperor smile and talk to me. And he's talking to me with a smile." Shangguan Linglan exclaimed in an exaggerated manner, "He's even scarier than Xing Erxiao." Oh. Now you're talking about Xing Er all the time." Lu Miaoqiu also put down the needle in her hand and looked at Shangguan Linglan with a smile. "Look at the three of us. Yaya already has a child and I'm already taken. Linglan, don't you think you need to speed up?" Cough, cough, cough. Shangguan Linglan heard Lu Miaoqiu's words and said with a blush, "I'm talking about the 9th emperors. Don't drag me into it." Ha. Lu Miaoqiu covered her mouth and laughed. She looked at Shangguan Linglan calmly and said, "I can see that you're interested in Xing Er. Why don't the two of them want to talk about it? What's the point of wasting time like this? Xing Er is too much. Isn't he afraid that a good girl like you will be taken away? Let's see what he'll do then." Lu Miaoqiu looked at Shangguan Linglan earnestly and said, "Linglan, what are you thinking? Don't tell me you still want to pick." Oh, I don't know either." Shangguan Linglan was incomparably shy every time this topic was brought up. She would vaguely reply and find an excuse to immediately run away. Hey. Lu Miaoqiu wanted to call out to Shangguan Linglan, but Shangguan Linglan's footsteps were too quick. She immediately ran out of sight. "This girl," Lu Miaoqiu called out helplessly. Jingyu covered her mouth and laughed. She said, "That's her temper. If nothing happens, she won't be anxious." Looking at her, I don't know when the two of them will talk things out. Really? Lu Miaoqiu also shook her head helplessly. These days passed peacefully. Jingyu's house had people coming to visit from time to time. Jingyu wasn't bored either. Qinbai came the most times, but Qinbai never stepped into the house. He only delivered a lot of things, stood at the door for a while, and then left. It was obvious that Qinbai was avoiding suspicion. Lu Miaoqiu and Shangguan Linglan approved of Qinbai's approach. As time passed, their guard against Qinbai was lowered. It seemed that Qinbai didn't have any bad intentions. Chapter 10:10. It didn't seem right to be picking on her like that. Jingyu. Jingyu was eating the snacks that Xiao Chun had sent over. While she was talking to Shangguan Linglan, Qinbai's voice sounded from outside. Shangguan Linglan paused for a moment, then smiled and said, "He's really here. Look, Qinbai always comes at this time."
Ah,
Jingyu paused for a moment, then said, "Let's go out and take a look." "Ah, I'd better go and invite him in," Shangguan Linglan said with a smile. "It seems impolite to let him stand outside the door all the time." Qinbai was invited into the house by Shangguan Linglan. Shanghai Linglan sat on a chair with a book in his hand. He watched as Qinbai sat down far away from Jingyu. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He turned to look at the book in his hand, no longer bothering with Qinbai. "Jingyu, this is fresh fruit. I heard that it's very useful for pregnant women." Qinbai put the thing in his hand on the table, smiled at Jingyu, and asked, "How's the baby? I heard that pregnancy is very difficult." "Thank you." Jingyu smiled at Qinbai, then said, "I feel much better. It's just that I feel a little bored lying in this house all day." "Bored?" Qinbai frowned slightly and said, "Don't worry. You'll be able to walk around after a few more days of rest." "Okay," Jingyu responded, then looked at Qinbai and asked, "By the way, you haven't told me yet. Since you're a member of the Holy Family, how did you get out here?" "I escaped." When Qinbai heard Jingyu's words, he sighed deeply and said, "I grew up without parents and spent the rest of my life peacefully in the clan. However, when the sixth elder wanted to take me in as a disciple, I refused and ran away." Qinbai made it sound simple. However, the more simple Qinbai made it sound, the more Jingyu felt that it wasn't simple. She was certain that the sixth elder wanted to force Qinbai, but Qinbai didn't want to, so he didn't chase after them. As for the sixth elder, Jingyu looked at Qinbai strangely and said, "You didn't run away when the sixth elder of the Holy Family was crippled, did you?" And Qinbai's face blushed slightly as he nodded in response. Ha 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 ha. Jingyu laughed heartily and said, "Well done." The two of them chatted happily because of this topic. Qinbai didn't talk much, but every sentence he said made Jingyu laugh heartily. Shangguan Linglan turned to look at them from time to time, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she listened to their conversation. Happiness in body and mind was good for the growth of the fetus. And it seemed that Qinbai was still useful. Jingyu and Qinbai talked for a long time before they separated. Xiao Chun was nowhere to be seen all day, and he was so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. At night, when Jingyu fell asleep, he quietly climbed into bed. He didn't leave until the next morning, and this continued for a long time. Jingyu was very upset about this, and it was difficult for her to see Xiao Chun. Then, Jingyu thought of a way to hold on and wait until Xiao Chun came back at night to see Xiao Chun. However, Jingyu waited every time and then mysteriously fell asleep, probably because she was pregnant. Jingyu was upset about this for a long time. Finally, that night, Qinbai taught Jingyu a way to get out of bed and walk around. She could also bite her tongue when she was sleepy or open the window to get some fresh air. Chapter 10:11. Jingyu listened to Qinbai's instructions and did as she was told. She wasn't sleepy anymore. Finally, when it was late at night, Xiao Chun came back. Jingyu was about to fall asleep when Xiao Chun finally opened the door and walked in. Oh! The moment the door opened, Jingyu was pleasantly surprised. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Chun. She propped herself up and said, "Xiao Chun, you're back. Why aren't you asleep yet?" Xiao Chun was slightly surprised to see Jingyu awake. He frowned slightly and looked at Jingyu. "I'm waiting for you." Jingyu stood up and took off Xiao Chun's coat. She said with a slight grievance, "I haven't seen you for a few days. Every time you come back, I'm already asleep. When I wake up in the morning, you're already gone." When Xiao Chun heard Jingyu's words, his heart skipped a beat. He realized that it was indeed the case. He raised his hand and wrapped it around Jingyu's waist. He said, "It's my fault. I've been a little busy with military affairs these few days." "It's fine. I just wanted to see you." Jingyu hugged Xiao Chun back. Her eyes curved into crescents as she smiled and said, "Our baby also said that he misses you." "Really? Let me hear it." Xiao Chen helped Jingyu to lie down on the bed. He carefully leaned on Jingyu's stomach to listen. Jingyu looked at Xiao Chen's appearance, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. She pushed Xiao Chen's head and said, "Did you hear it?" I heard it." Xiao Chen nodded as if he was serious. His dark eyes flashed with a faint smile. The two of them chatted for a while. When Jingyu saw how tired Xiao Chen was, she couldn't bear to continue pestering Xiao Chen. She hugged Xiao Chen and fell asleep. Jingyu was also very tired. She hugged Xiao Chen's arm and felt very comfortable. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Jingyu was finally able to go out, but the places she could go were still greatly restricted. I just wanted to sit in that courtyard. Jingyu was almost driven crazy by the torture. She finally got out of the house, but Jingyu was still not allowed to walk out of the yard. Jingyu was about to explode from boredom. She wasn't allowed to do this. She wasn't allowed to eat that. No matter what she did or ate, she had to consider the child in her stomach. This made Jingyu mad. The Ninth Emperor said that we must protect you and the child in your stomach. Lu Miaoqiu rolled her eyes. She grabbed Jingyu's hand and refused to let her go. She said seriously, "For the sake of the child in your stomach, you just stay here peacefully." Oh my God. Jingyu looked dispirited as she found a place to sit down. She looked at her stomach and said, "It's just being pregnant with a child. This is worse than being in prison." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Lu Miaoqiu glared at Jingyu, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. This Ninth Emperor's was making a mountain out of a molehill. Lu Miaoqiu and the others couldn't help but laugh. Jingyu and Lu Miaoqiu sat in the courtyard, chatting as they ate. Just as they were happily chatting, Xing'er and Shangguan Linglan rushed in. Jingyu's smile faded when she saw their serious expressions. "What is it?" Jingyu looked up at Shangguan Linglan and Xing'er with furrowed brows. "Madam, the Holy Family and Poison Sect have appeared." Xing'er took a deep breath and said, "We just received news that the Poison Sect and Holy Family have appeared in Nanli and Tokyo's armies. If I'm not mistaken, they're discussing an alliance." Chapter 10:12. What did you say? Jingyu shot to her feet. News from the Poison Sect and the Holy Family had finally arrived, but it wasn't good news. Jingyu's eyes widened as a grave expression appeared on her face. "We're still investigating the exact situation." Xing'er lowered his head slightly. "Master told Madam not to worry, that he has his own plans. However, I'll have to trouble Crown Princess to stay by Madam's side for the next few days. Master is busy with military affairs and can't return." "I understand." Jingyu nodded. Lu Miaoqiu nodded as well. "Tell Xiao Chen to be well. I'm fine." Xing'er answered Jingyu's simple questions before leaving with Shangguan Linglan. Jingyu wasn't sure if she was imagining things, or if the situation outside was even more terrifying than Xing'er had described, but Jingyu suddenly felt as if all of Jinling town was preparing for war. But now, outside of Jinling, there was finally a change. The original balance was finally broken. "Your Highness." A figure rushed into the Cebu camp. Wei Ling was calmly sitting inside, drinking tea without a trace of emotion on his face. "How is it?" Wei Ling paused when he saw the person enter, then looked up to ask. "There's no problem." The young general who came in seemed to be very agitated as he said, "The Ink cavalry fell into our trap and suffered heavy casualties. Our army chased them into the forest, and there are no more movements from them." "Very good." When Wei Ling heard this reply, a deep smile finally appeared in his eyes. The young general at the side said, "These Ink cavalry are really powerful. If His Highness the Crown Prince had not thought of this method, I'm afraid we would still be in a passive position." Humph! Wei Ling slammed his teacup on the table. "Jingyu is truly capable. Can't you see that the Mahist cavalry is using us as whetstones? How could this Crown Prince let them succeed so easily? Your Highness is truly wise." The young general nodded in agreement. Inside the tent, Wei Ling's eyes flashed with cold killing intent. He lifted the teacup on the table and drained it in one gulp. For so long, the Cebu camp had been constantly attacked by the so-called Mahist cavalry, but they hadn't been able to capture them. Just like this, The two sides fought countless times every day. After fighting for so long, Wei Ling finally managed to severely injure the Mahist cavalry today. If it wasn't for the fact that the Black Qilin was too difficult to subdue, Wei Ling was absolutely confident that he could bury all of them in the Cebu camp. Right now, in the forest, within the mountain rocks, a group of people was resting. The grass outside was stained with blood. Following the blood, one could see that many people were leaning against the rocks with their eyes tightly shut. "Captain," a weak voice sounded. Everyone opened their eyes slightly, and a tall figure slowly stood up. Sanner. This captain was none other than Li Weiming. At this moment, he was squatting in front of someone with a grave expression. This person, whom Li Weiming called Sanner, was bleeding nonstop. His pale face made Li Weiming's expression extremely grave. "Captain, I'm afraid I can't make it." The man's breathing was already very weak. He opened his eyes and looked at Li Weiming. The people around him all surrounded him. Everyone here was covered in blood and wounds. Chapter 10:13. They didn't know if the blood on their bodies was their own or someone else's. Some of them even had their arms broken and were bandaged. Their faces were also extremely pale. The high-spirited Mahist cavalry from before had now grown into such a state. It really made people sigh. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Sanner. Without a doubt, he was the most seriously injured. His stomach was almost pierced by a spear. Now, he was hanging on with his last breath. It was really not easy for him to hold on for so long. "Brother." Li Weiming stared at Sanner for a long time and sincerely spat out these few words. His eyes were glistening with tears. At this moment, he couldn't hold it in anymore and turned his head away, not wanting others to see him. "Brother." Sanner's lips trembled slightly. His somewhat blurry eyes looked at everyone's faces one by one, as if he was using the last of his strength to remember everyone's faces. He sighed and said these few words as if he was saying goodbye. "Sanner, farewell." Li Weiming's pair of pitch-black eyes stared at Sanner. He raised his hand and extended it towards Sanner. Sanner stared at Li Weiming's outstretched hand and revealed a faint smile. He raised his trembling hand. It was obviously such a simple action, but it was so difficult for Sanner to do it. Finally, the two hands clasped together. Li Weiming firmly grasped Sanner's hand. In a trance, they seemed to have returned to the past. During training, they fought together, wrestled together, and scolded together. Everything was so exciting, but Hu Anyang didn't expect that at this time, the brothers who said that they would become famous together would leave them alone. Sanner. Sanner stared at Li Weiming. His tightly clasped hands finally released all their strength. Everyone watched as Sanner closed his eyes. At that moment, everyone let out a low cry. This cry was so heart-wrenching. "Sanner is gone. Our brother. Farewell." Li Weiming suddenly stood up and wiped away the tears in his eyes as if he was trying to hide something. He stared at everyone and said, "Do you still remember what Boss said? With the glory of our brothers. Live. Avenge our brothers." Li Weiming's words sounded. Everyone stood up and stared at Li Weiming. Their eyes were burning with passion. "Good. Live." Everyone nodded fiercely. Their eyes were filled with excitement. In this forest, at this moment, these people had truly matured. Without experiencing life and death, without experiencing the baptism of sweat and blood, how could they have matured? After this defeat, the Mahist cavalry's reputation would rise from the forest, from Jinling town. On the other side, another scene was happening in the northern pastoral camp. "Muyu, don't you like the 9th Imperial concubine?" Helian Theo narrowed his eyes at Muyu and said, "As long as you send troops to capture Shao Chun, the 9th Imperial concubine will be yours." Muyu was extremely unwilling. However, after hearing Helian Theo's words, his eyes lit up. He looked at Helian Theo excitedly and said, "What did you just say? Capture Shao Chun?" Chapter 10:14. That's right. If you capture Shao Chun, then won't Jingyu be at your mercy? And you won't hurt Jingyu. What do you think? Hellion Theo looked at Muyu calmly. Muyu's eyes lit up when he heard Hellion Theo's words. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Muyu jumped up in joy. As long as Xiao Chen is gone, that Jingyu will definitely fall for me. So? Hellion Xiao smiled as he looked at the amount of money in the military-level database. After a period of time, Hellion Xiao said that he saw a deep movement in the wound and coughed in the space. Who could see it? He opened his mouth and said that he was injured. He said that it was the importer of the wound. Dispatch the troops. Dispatch the troops immediately. Hurry. Muyu jumped up in excitement. He stared at Hellion Theo and urged him. Hellion Theo's face darkened. If he had known that he would be able to convince Muyu so easily, he wouldn't have wasted so much effort chasing after him to dispatch the troops. Couldn't he have just used this excuse? Hellion Theo watched Muyu jump up and down and the corners of his mouth twitched. The Northern Pastoral had dispatched the troops so quickly. It was like a duck being forced onto a perch. The soldiers of the Northern Pastoral were deeply suspicious. Did Lord Mu eat the wrong medicine? The Fifth Prince and Lord Mu had argued countless times over the matter of dispatching the troops. Why was he in such a hurry to dispatch the troops now? While the Northern Pastoral was dispatching the troops, the Cebu's forces, which had been held back, finally arrived at Jinling. The Tokyo and Nanli had a moment of peace. The next day, they announced their cooperation with the Holy Family and the Poison Sect. Jinling was finally facing a huge crisis. Master, Jinling Town was also in a state of chaos. Everyone was stunned by the tense situation. The people walking in and out sped up a lot. Xiao Chun sat in a chair with a solemn expression. He stared at the drawings on the table in front of him and narrowed his eyes slightly. What's the situation? Xiao Chun asked when he saw Xing Er walk in. The armies of the 4 countries have gathered and are heading towards Jinling. However, there's no news of the alliance yet. Xing Er took a deep breath and replied. When Xiao Chun heard Xing Er's words, he leaned back slightly and didn't say anything. Master, what are your plans? Second Xing frowned and asked Xiao Chun, what's the situation on Xing Yi's side? Xiao Chun asked after a moment of silence. Second Xing frowned and said, the situation doesn't look good. I'm afraid they're determined to come this time. Xiao Chun replied indifferently. Inform the entire army to prepare for battle. This king will personally go.
Master.
When Xing Er heard Xiao Chun's words, his expression suddenly changed. He stared at Xiao Chun in shock. He didn't expect Xiao Chun to want to personally go. Now that Jingyu was pregnant, this situation, what they want is for this king to go. Xiao Chun's expression didn't change at all. He said indifferently, since they're so anxious, how can this king not fulfill their wish? Xiao Chun's words were emotionless. Xing Er frowned slightly. He had followed Xiao Chun for so long, but for some reason, when he heard that Xiao Chun wanted to personally go to the battlefield, he felt uneasy. Chapter 10:15. Go and make the arrangements. Xiao Chun closed his eyes slightly and said, if I'm not wrong, the war will start in a few days. Go and summon Xing Yi back. He's no longer needed there. Yes. Xing Er responded and turned to leave. It was as if a storm was coming, causing everyone to feel depressed. After Xing Er came to inform her, Jingyu could no longer sit still. She paced around the room, feeling very uneasy. Xiao Qian had disappeared for a few days, and only Lu Miaoqiu accompanied her in the courtyard. Jingyu wanted to go out several times, but just as Jingyu was thinking about this, Qinbai arrived. When Jingyu saw Qinbai arrive, her heart strangely calmed down. After seeing Qinbai take a seat, she hurriedly asked about the situation outside. Jingyu, don't worry. Qinbai looked at Jingyu quietly and said, the situation outside isn't as bad as you think. You should know that when the 9 emperors shook the world, he made his name on the battlefield. You have to believe in him. When Qinbai finished speaking, Jingyu's anxious heart suddenly calmed down. When Lu Miaoqiu heard Qinbai's words, her heart relaxed slightly. Her gaze towards Qinbai also became much gentler. In the past, she always felt that Qinbai was a bit calculative when interacting with Jingyu. However, after interacting with him for a long time, Lu Miaoqiu wondered if she was wrong. After staying in the harem for so long, her gaze towards others had become unfriendly. After interacting with Qinbai for so long, Lu Miaoqiu felt that she was wrong about him. Now that she heard Qinbai's words of comfort to Jingyu, she suddenly felt that she was overthinking. Qinbai was really sincere towards Jingyu. When the 9 emperors return, it will be the time of great victory. Qinbai smiled and looked at Jingyu. Is that so? Jingyu's eyes flashed with confusion for a moment. She sighed deeply and said, It's true that caring makes one confused. The most important thing for you now is to take good care of the child in your belly and wait here quietly for the 9 emperors to come back and reunite with you. Qinbai smiled and looked at Jingyu as he said, I think this must be what the 9 emperors are looking forward to the most. Yes. Jingyu raised her hand and covered her belly with a faint smile in her eyes. Jingyu's impetuous heart finally calmed down after hearing Qinbai's words. After Qinbai left, Jingyu fell asleep peacefully. Lu Miaoqiu gently covered Jingyu with a blanket. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she heard footsteps behind her. The 9 emperors? Lu Miaoqiu turned around and saw Xiao Qian walking into the room. Her eyes widened slightly and she called out in surprise. Xiao Qian was wearing heavy armor and carefully stepped into the room. When he heard Lu Miaoqiu's call, he shook his head slightly and signaled to Lu Miaoqiu not to disturb Jingyu. Lu Miaoqiu understood Xiao Qian's intention and nodded slightly. She moved to the side and quietly left the room, leaving Jingyu and Xiao Qian alone. Before she left, Lu Miaoqiu looked at Xiao Qian's armor. She didn't need to guess what Xiao Qian was going to do next. A hint of worry appeared in her eyes, but she quietly turned her head and closed the door. Chapter 10:16. Xiao Qian's tall figure stood on the spot. In order not to disturb Jingyu with his armor, Xiao Qian's gait was a little awkward. He practically moved his body to stand in front of Jingyu and squatted down carefully. A pair of pitch-black eyes stared at Jingyu. His eyes, which were supposed to be cold, were filled with tenderness when he looked at Jingyu. He squatted down quietly by the bed and carefully observed Jingyu's face. This scene was so quiet that no one could bear to break it. When Xing Er and Xing Yi arrived, this was the scene they saw. Lu Miaoqiu stood at the door. 2 hours had passed, but Xiao Qian had actually squatted there for 2 hours. Finally, Xiao Qian moved. He slowly stood up and gently kissed Jingyu's forehead. Then, his gaze landed on Jingyu's stomach. After taking a deep look, he resolutely turned and left. His back view was so resolute. Behind him were his woman and his child. What he had to do now was to protect them.
Master.
After Xiao Qian walked to the door, his eyes, which were originally filled with tenderness when he looked at Jingyu, had become extremely solemn. His pitch-black eyes flashed with an incomparably sharp gaze. Let's go. Xiao Qian didn't say anything else. With just this one word, he silently led Xing Yi and Xing Er away. Lu Miaoqiu stood in the same spot and watched Xiao Qian leave. That tall back view and steady footsteps made Lu Miaoqiu's heart tremble violently. This was their 9th emperors, the 9th emperors whose name shook the world. At this moment, Lu Miaoqiu seemed to suddenly understand something. When Jingyu woke up, the sky was already dark. When it was almost nighttime, Jingyu slowly woke up. Yeah, you're awake? Lu Miaoqiu just happened to walk in with food. When she saw Jingyu waking up, she hurriedly walked over. The corners of her mouth curved into a faint smile. She said warmly, You really can sleep. It's almost nighttime. Aya. Jingyu rubbed her neck and said, What's wrong? Why did I sleep for so long? You also know that you slept for so long? Lu Miaoqiu put down the food in her hands and said, I thought you wouldn't wake up until tomorrow morning. Lu Miaoqiu didn't look at Jingyu. She put the food in her hands on the table and said with a smile, And Jingyu casually replied. When she was about to get out of bed, she saw a black footprint on the ground. Suddenly, Jingyu's heart trembled slightly. She stared at the footprint and said, Who came when I was asleep? What do you mean by who came? When Jingyu finished speaking, Lu Miaoqiu's hand that was holding the plate trembled slightly. The bowl in her hand almost fell. Jingyu saw Lu Miaoqiu's strange expression, and her expression changed slightly. She said, Xiao Chen came, right? Yeah. Lu Miaoqiu hurriedly put down the plate in her hands. Her face was slightly pale. She looked at Jingyu and bit her lip. Xiao Chen came. Where is he? Why aren't you saying anything? When Jingyu saw Lu Miaoqiu's expression, her originally happy expression suddenly froze. When she saw Lu Miaoqiu not daring to say anything, she instantly realized something and her face turned slightly pale. Miaoqiu, where's Xiao Chen? Jingyu stood up and strode toward Lu Miaoqiu and asked. Chapter 10:17. The Ninth Emperor's He. Lu Miaoqiu looked at Jingyu's gaze and sighed helplessly. 2 hours ago, the Ninth Emperor's left with his army. What? When Lu Miaoqiu finished speaking, Jingyu's eyes suddenly widened. She stared at Lu Miaoqiu in disbelief and said, What did you just say? Xiao Chen left with his army? He personally left? Yes. Lu Miaoqiu bit her lips slightly and looked at Jingyu as she said, You were sleeping at the time. I wanted to wake you up, but the Ninth Emperors didn't want to, so how long has it been since the army left? Jingyu was stunned for a long time before she finally regained her senses. She took a deep breath and stared at Lu Miaoqiu as she asked. According to the itinerary, they left about an hour ago. Lu Miaoqiu calculated carefully and replied. As soon as Lu Miaoqiu finished speaking, Jingyu suddenly dashed out. Lu Miaoqiu's face was filled with shock as she quickly chased after Jingyu. If Jingyu ran out and something happened to her, she would be finished. Jingyu almost instinctively wanted to chase after her, but when she ran to the entrance of the courtyard, she bumped into Qin Bai. I'm going to see Xiao Chen. Jingyu's eyes sparkled as she stared at Qin Bai. When Lu Miaoqiu rushed out, this was the scene she saw. Qin Bai quietly stared at Jingyu. Under Lu Miaoqiu's anxious gaze, Qin Bai slowly nodded. Okay, I'll take you there, Qin Bai said. When Lu Miaoqiu heard Qin Bai's words, she became even more anxious. If Xiao Chen leaves, can you come back with me? Qin Bai didn't say anything and just stared quietly at Jingyu. When Jingyu heard Qin Bai's words, her heart trembled slightly. She seemed to be very conflicted. In the end, she slowly nodded and replied, Okay, I'll take good care of her. After hearing Jingyu's words, Qin Bai raised his eyes and looked at Lu Miaoqiu indifferently. Then, he turned around and left with Jingyu. Lu Miaoqiu stood in a daze. She didn't know why Qin Bai's gaze made her heart tremble for a moment. That feeling made Lu Miaoqiu very frightened. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. Lu Miaoqiu didn't even have time to think about it before it disappeared. However, just this 1 second was enough to make Lu Miaoqiu feel terrified. She clenched her fists tightly, and a dignified look appeared in her eyes. She turned around and wanted to go back into the house, but she stopped. Then, she turned around again and ran out of the courtyard. Jingyu was brought to the entrance of Jinling Town by Qin Bai. There were no longer so many soldiers here. Now, it was empty. Only a few old soldiers were left here. Jingyu stood at the entrance of the town. She looked at the long aisle and sighed deeply. He left. Jingyu bit her lips slightly and looked sideways at Qin Bai, who was standing beside her, and asked, When will he come back? Soon. Qin Bai responded faintly. He followed Jingyu's gaze. There was no change in his calm face. Jingyu didn't speak anymore. She suddenly felt a little pain in her heart. She didn't know why, but at this moment, Jingyu actually wanted to chase after Xiao Chen and ask him not to go. But Jingyu didn't know why she didn't want Xiao Chen to go. She only felt that this feeling was very strange. Chapter 10:18. Jingyu. Just as Jingyu's heart was in pain, someone suddenly grabbed her hand. The warm touch made Jingyu's body tremble. She instantly broke away from that feeling and turned to look at Qin Bai. Xiao Chen has left. You should come back with me, Qin Bai said. It was a very normal sentence, but Jingyu did not know if it was an illusion, but she felt as if Qin Bai's come back with me meant something else. Jingyu frowned and let go of Qin Bai's hand. Let's go. Jingyu turned and left. The war had officially begun. Jingyu was protected in Jinling and didn't know anything about it. A few days later, news came that Xiao Chun had led his troops to confront the armies of the 4 countries. Jingyu read the contents of the letter and knew that Xiao Chun wanted to defeat them one by one. However, she didn't know if it was just her imagination, but she felt very uneasy. Yeah. Only Jingyu, Lu Miaoqiu, Yuan Mingyuan, and Shengguan Linglan were left in Jinling town with Xiao Chun. Only Jingyu, Qin Bai, Qin Gu, and Lu Miaoqiu were left in Jinling town. Qin Gu seemed to be studying medicine. For the past few days, he had been hiding in his courtyard and didn't make any movements. Lu Miaoqiu originally wanted to find Shengguan Linglan and talk to him about Qin Bai. However, Shanghai Linglan had unexpectedly left with the army. Lu Miaoqiu didn't find him. She had a lot of things she wanted to say, but there was no one to say them. She felt very uncomfortable. After Xiao Chun left, Jingyu was a little depressed. Qin Bai came more and more frequently. Every time Lu Miaoqiu saw Qin Bai and Jingyu together, she felt very uneasy. This uneasiness made Lu Miaoqiu slightly wary of Qin Bai. Miaoqiu. At this moment, Jingyu was lying on a soft bed to recuperate. The fetus in the residence was still a little unstable, so Jingyu couldn't walk around. When she saw Lu Miaoqiu come in, she said, "What good food did you bring?" "It's your favorite dishes." Lu Miaoqiu looked at Jingyu's greedy appearance and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. She said, "Come and take a look." Jingyu sat up with her arms supporting her body. She looked at Lu Miaoqiu and said, "Oh, Qin Bai will come over later. Go get another pair of chopsticks." Yeah. When Lu Miaoqiu heard Jingyu's words, she paused and frowned. She said, "Qin Bai is a man. Isn't it a little inappropriate to keep him in the room to eat every day? How about, or, Miaoqiu?" When Jingyu heard Lu Miaoqiu's words, she frowned and said, "Do you hate Qin Bai? He is my savior. Nothing will happen to him. If it wasn't for him accompanying me all day, I really wouldn't know what to do." Jingyu. When Lu Miaoqiu heard Jingyu's words, the uneasiness in her heart grew stronger. "Nothing will happen." Jingyu raised her hand and patted Lu Miaoqiu's hand. She smiled and said, When Lu Miaoqiu saw Jingyu's expression, she sighed deeply and didn't say anything. Not long after, Qin Bai really did come over. When Lu Miaoqiu saw Jingyu smile, she felt even more strange. When she saw Qin Bai and Jingyu eating together, Lu Miaoqiu felt her chest tighten. She had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. After thinking for a while, she didn't have anyone else to talk to. The only person she could talk to was Qin Gu. Chapter 10:19. With that thought, Lu Miaoqiu gritted her teeth, turned around, and walked out of the courtyard towards Qingji's courtyard. Sir Qinggu. Standing in front of the door, Lu Miaoqiu craned her neck and called into the room. A moment later, there was movement from the room. Under Lu Miaoqiu's gaze, the door slowly opened. A silhouette stood at the door. His eyes were green, his clothes were messy, and his hair was completely uncombed. When Lu Miaoqiu saw him, she was stunned for a full 3 seconds. Was this person really the elegant godly doctor? After Lu Miaoqiu came back to her senses, she silently swallowed her saliva and said, "Sir Qinggu?" It's the Crown Prince Consort. Qinggu also stared at Lu Miaoqiu in confusion for a long time before he hurriedly reacted and said, "Please wait for a moment. Allow this one to tidy up." After saying that, Qinggu closed the door with a bang, leaving a dazed Lu Miaoqiu standing in the same spot. She stared at the door with a dazed expression. She really couldn't imagine what Qinggu was doing in this room. Finally, after the two sat down, Qingji's blue clothes were neatly tidied up. Other than a bit of sleepiness on his face, everything else was very good. "Crown Prince Consort, why did you come to find this one?" Qinggu asked Lu Miaoqiu with a faint smile on his lips. "It's like this." Lu Miaoqiu paused slightly and asked, "I want to ask if there is any medicine that can control people, the kind that can control people's minds, or make people fall in love with another person?" "This?" Qinggu heard Lu Miaoqiu's words and frowned deeply. He slowly shook his head and said, "This one has never seen this kind of medicine, but there is a kind of hypnosis and witchcraft that has this ability." Hypnosis? Witchcraft? Lu Miaoqiu blinked and looked at Qinggu with confusion in her eyes. It's hypnosis. Qinggu looked at Lu Miaoqiu and explained, for example, there is a kind of hallucinogenic medicine that allows you to be hypnotized by music and fall into a strange illusion. However, this kind of hypnosis is ineffective after the person wakes up. Oh. Lu Miaoqiu nodded slightly and asked again, "What is this witchcraft?" The art of witchcraft is even easier to understand. Qinggu smiled faintly and said, "The art of witchcraft comes from the land of Miaojiang. It can control this person by planting a voodoo worm in the human body." Then how can this voodoo worm be planted? Lu Miaoqiu frowned slightly and asked Qinggu. The most common way is to plant it through food. Qinggu frowned slightly and said, "However, to activate this voodoo worm, it must be activated by the unique flute sound of Miaojiang. Otherwise, this voodoo worm will have no effect in the body." Oh. Lu Miaoqiu nodded slightly and didn't speak. "Crown Princess, why are you asking about this?" Qinggu frowned slightly and looked at Lu Miaoqiu. "Did something happen to the Crown Princess?" "Oh, nothing." Lu Miaoqiu shook her head slightly and said, "I'm just thinking randomly. Since Sir Qinggu is still so busy, I won't bother you. I'll leave first." "Wait." Qinggu stood up slightly and stopped Lu Miaoqiu, saying, "I haven't seen ninth sister-in-law for a long time. Are you going back? I'll go with you." When Qinggu said this, Lu Miaoqiu's eyes flashed with joy. Chapter 1020. Okay. Lu Miaoqiu nodded. Qinggu and Lu Miaoqiu returned to Jingyu's courtyard together. When Lu Miaoqiu returned, Qinbai was still in the courtyard. Jingyu and Qinbai were talking to each other. Qinggu. When Jingyu saw Qingji's arrival, her eyes flashed with surprise. Then, she curled her lips and said, "Why are you here? I haven't seen you for a long time. I thought you left." Haha. Ninth sister's child has yet to be born. How would I dare to leave? Qinggu replied with a faint smile in his eyes. Really? Jingyu looked at Qinggu and shook her head. She gestured for him to take a seat. Qinggu saw Qinbai. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Young Master Qin is here too. What a coincidence." Miracle Dr. Qinggu. Qinbai looked at Qinggu and replied calmly. "Huh. Huh." Qinggu looked at Qinbai and frowned. He felt weird, but he did not know what was weird about it. In the end, he laughed at himself and said, "Sister Nine, how is the baby in my belly?" "It's good. There aren't any special reactions." Jingyu lowered her head and put her hand on her stomach. "But is there really a child in my stomach? Why aren't there any changes?" PFFF. Qinggu smiled when he heard Jingyu's question. He said, "The child is only 2 months old. Why would there be any changes?" Is that so? Jingyu touched her stomach with a puzzled expression. She felt that this child was too miraculous. She pursed her lips slightly and touched her stomach as she said, "It's really strange. I thought my stomach would swell and hurt." Qinggu smiled when he heard Jingyu's words. He was a man, but Jingyu didn't know. In order to let Jingyu understand, Qinggu had to tell her all the things she needed to pay attention to. The two of them sat in the courtyard and talked for a long time. Lu Miaoqiu looked at the two of them. Qinggu didn't seem to have changed. Could it be that Lu Miaoqiu's guess was wrong? Was she overthinking? After sitting for a while, Qinggu and Qinbai left. Lu Miaoqiu looked at their backs and frowned. Miaoqiu? What's wrong? Jingyu looked at Lu Miaoqiu with a puzzled expression and said, Why are you so distracted these few days? Is there something wrong? No. Lu Miaoqiu shook her head and said, I'm just thinking about whether the child in your stomach is a boy or a girl. What kind of clothes should I make for the child? Lu Miaoqiu looked at Jingyu with a smile. When Jingyu heard Lu Miaoqiu's words, she smiled faintly and said, It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl. As for the clothes, what's the hurry? Isn't there still some time before the child is born? Jingyu looked at Lu Miaoqiu coquettishly. Lu Miaoqiu lowered her head shyly and said, You're right. I was too anxious.
Ha ha ha.
The two of them laughed. Lu Miaoqiu helped Jingyu into the room. After watching Jingyu fall asleep, Lu Miaoqiu walked out of the room. In Jinling, there was no one to accompany her. Lu Miaoqiu couldn't find anyone to talk to. Chapter 10:21. On the other side, Qinbai and Qinggu left the house together. They walked for a while. The two of them kept talking. Qinggu turned his head to look at Qinbai's face. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he thought Qinbai looked familiar. Mr. Qin, are you from the Holy Family? Qinggu looked at Qinbai and suddenly asked.
Yes.
Qinbai nodded and said with a smile, Miracle Dr. Qinggu, are you the chief doctor of Miracle Doctor Valley? I didn't expect you to be so young. Haha, it's just a title that people call me. Qinggu waved his hand shyly and said, What is Mr. Qin's status in the Holy Family? How could the Holy Family let you out so easily? I'm just a nobody. Qinbai stopped and looked at Qinggu with a smile. I'm here. Miracle Dr. Qinggu, please help yourself. After Qinbai said this, he turned around and walked toward his courtyard. Qinggu frowned and looked at Qinbai. Just as he was about to look away, he suddenly saw Qinbai's wrist. Something seemed to flash by on Qinbai's wrist. Qinggu frowned and wanted to take a closer look, but Qinbai had already walked into the house and disappeared. Qinggu shook his head in confusion and thought that he was seeing things. He shook his head helplessly and turned to leave. The war was still going on, and Jingyu had nothing to do in Jinling Town. Everything seemed to be going well, and there were battle reports coming in from time to time. Jingyu's fetus was also stable and would be 3 months old in 10 days. After stabilizing the fetus for the first 3 months, it would be much easier in the future. On this day, when Jingyu was learning embroidery from Lu Miaoqiu in the room, a voice came from outside. A servant ran in, bowed slightly to Jingyu and said, Ninth Imperial Concubine, Master Qin is not in the courtyard. Qinbai is not in? Jingyu blinked in confusion. It was mealtime, and Jingyu said that she wanted to call Qinbai over for dinner. She didn't expect this reply, which made Jingyu stop what she was doing. Yes. The servant bowed. Did he say where did Qinbai go? Jingyu frowned and asked the servant. He didn't. The servant continued. The servants in the courtyard don't know where he went. What's going on? Jingyu frowned in confusion. She raised her head and looked at the manservant in front of her. Quickly get someone to look for her. It's best if nothing happened. Get everyone to look for her. Qinbai's disappearance made Jingyu panic for a moment. She frowned and asked everyone in the town to look for him. Jingyu still remembered that Qinbai was from the Holy Family. If something happened to him, could it be that someone else from the Holy Family came out? Yeah, you don't have to go. Lu Miaoqiu looked at Jing Yu and frowned. I'm fine. Let's go and look for Qinbai. Jing Yu waved her hand slightly and pushed Lu Miaoqiu to search together. While everyone was searching, Jing Yu circled around the rockery in the backyard. After walking around for a while, she was separated from Lu Miaoqiu. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.